Christopher de Santiago with Sports Illustrated's MMA Knockout, here today with the Ultimate Fighter finalist and UFC Bantamweight veteran Cody the Renegade Gibson, coming off back-to-back wins at UFC Edmonton. Cody, how's it going today?
Pretty good. It's my last day off work. I go back next week, and so I'm trying to soak it in a little bit. More often than not, if I fight on Saturday, I'm back at work on Monday. But it just I took some FMLA to be with my son, and they only do it in even number increments. So it was either going to be, it wasn't going to work out if I would have not been able to be at my fight. So I was like, oh, I got to take the week after off too. So I've enjoyed it this week coming home and just have kind of been able to get back in the swing of life and not have to rush back to the classroom. So I'll be back next week though.
Awesome, man. What's the biggest compliment one of your students has given to you, like after a fight?
That's a good question. I don't know. I honestly don't focus on myself when I'm at work, like it's always about the kids and like, yeah, they'll ask questions and I'll give them, I'll give them answers and advice on things. But I try to, think about the lessons I've learned in the sport and like, working hard and keeping your head down and, some of the lessons that you could apply in any avenue of life. And that's kind of usually what I try to focus on. And how do you apply those lessons to your own life in sports or in the classroom? And so I try to, keep the focus on them. And I do get a lot of questions about it, but I usually try to turn the conversation around to be not a spotlight on myself, but a reflection on, what I've learned and how that could help them. So that's usually the direction I take it, or I try to recruit them for the wrestling team. That's another big one.
That's awesome, man. Are you a wrestling coach or are you still like a PE teacher?
Both. Well, last season I'm sorry, I fought in March, and the middle school wrestling season here in the Central Coast of California is uh, I would have missed like about half the season.
Hmm.
And so I had to step down last year. I was the head coach 2 years ago, and then last year the high school coach um, took over the middle school as well, so that I could train for my fight. This year we'll see what happens. I enjoy coaching and everything like that, but you only got 24 hours in a day and three kids and fighting and teaching, and something's got to give at some point. So I'll always be on the mats one way or another, but I don't know if I'm gonna sign off on the commitment of full-time coach even at the middle school, when fighting's still the focus. So we'll see.
Hmm. It looks like you haven't even been in a fist fight. No bumps or bruises, no black eyes. I know UFC 311's coming up in January, LA card. Have you talked to your wife about, potentially fighting on there? What's the plan with you?
I mentioned that at the little press conference thing at the end of the fight, that I did hear they were coming to LA in January for a big pay-per-view. And I think me and my wife are both a little bit tired.
Hmm.
We've had three fights in 2024, and uh, especially between the second and the third fight, I felt like I got home and like a week and a half after the fight, and I text my manager and was like, "Hey, is it cool if I do some grappling matches? You know how they do like the UFC Fight Pass grappling matches, or like different, kind of like
Yeah.
they build it like a fight card, I was like, hey, I'd like to do a couple grappling matches. Is that cool? And he said, and this was only like a week or two after the fight, and he was like, actually, I think I got another fight for you. So I put the grappling matches to the back burner and started training for this last fight. So it's been a busy year, but I'm getting up there in age and I want to stay busy. So if the UFC called me and said, hey, we want you on that LA card, I think I'd have a hard time saying no. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do with work, and I've got to talk to my boss, and uh, I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest with you. I'm to a point where, you know, I've got to make a decision, and I don't want to. The thing I'm not going to do is leave the school district or my kids and high and dry and just leave without a replacement in line. Um, so we'll see. I mean, it's a it's a difficult situation to be in because while things are going good, I'm winning fights. There's a security problem, with fighting, and so I've got three kids to think about. I know that trying to balance training and working full time is. I did that in March for the Miles Johns fight, and I just didn't. I mean, you can see it if you watch the fight back. It just doesn't look like the same guy. Um,
Hmm.
and so I know at this highest level where I'm fighting the best of the best, I've got to give my full attention to it. And I don't want to look back at 45, 50 years old and think, what if I had gone all in? And so I kind of got to figure some things out at work this next month or so and talk to my boss and see what we could work out or not. If he says, "Hey, we can't find a replacement," I'm not gonna. I know I'm not gonna leave the school or the kids, especially in a situation where they've got a substitute teacher all year. And so, if I've got to stay till June and complete my contract, then it'll suck, but I'll do that. I'm hoping that maybe we could. I don't know. I got to talk to my boss. This is all still kind of fluid, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, that January card, it is a little soon, but at the same time, I'm like I said, I'm not getting any younger, and I want to stay busy. I want another 3 or 4 fights this next year, so um, yeah. I mean, if they called and said, "Hey, we want you on that LA card. You're a California guy," uh, it would be hard to turn that down for sure.
Hmm. So if they called you, and I feel like you're kind of like at a crossroads, maybe heading into next year, maybe. But if they were to give you that call for 311, do you feel like it? You might have to transition into being a full-time fighter, from what I'm hearing.
I mean, I really do not want to have to balance it all again. I did it for many years on the regional scene, but I just feel like the competition continues. Especially if I continue to win fights, it's only going to get stiffer, and uh, and it's unfair to my opponents too. Like I want the best version of the guy I'm fighting to, a guy who's just devoted the last 8 to 10 weeks of his life to this, and so. Um, I don't know. Honestly, there's a lot of question marks surrounding that kind of stuff, and me and my wife have been having a lot of conversations about it. So I go back next week. I'm going to sit down with my boss and kind of explain the situation to him, and we'll see what happens.
Awesome, man. Well, I hope the best for you. I had a question about the fight. What's it like to beat Jon Jones to the punch, or should I say 12 to 6 elbow?
I know, right? Yeah, it was cool. I knew, I actually thought that the downward opponent knees were going to be something I could utilize more than the 12 to 6 elbow. But I was training 12 to 6 elbows. Like it was definitely like where are the positions where you could utilize this new rule set. And I knew, the dominant positions are where you're going to be able to really throw them. And every time I'd go to mount, that would be the first thing I looked for is a downward elbow. So, um, yeah, it was cool, to actually be able to. And I knew I was a second fight of the card, and a lot of times guys will be bummed out by that. And I'm usually not that early on the card, so I was a little bit like, dang, I'm like second fight. But then I started thinking like, well, if the first fight doesn't have any, then I'll be the first one to be able to utilize these new rules. So, um, yeah, cool. A little feather in the cap or notch in the belt or whatever you want to call it. But um, yeah, it was cool to be able to utilize them. And I think the visuals of it, you watch a fight and then all of a sudden you kind of forget about the rule set to some extent, and then all of a sudden you see it and you're like, oh, like you almost want to like, is that illegal? Like because we've had years of conditioning like that. Um, so yeah, thinking about it and training it prior to the fight allowed me to build the muscle memory so that when we were in there, I didn't have to think. It was natural.
Hmm. Jon Jones says that he's been utilizing them a lot during his training camp. That he's been working on them extensively. In an interview with Kevin Iole, I guess, do you expect to see or how much of a factor do you think the 12 to 6 elbows will be for Jon Jones heading into his return?
I mean, John's a really long guy with long arms, so I'm sure he's going to be able to use them. For me, I feel like you kind of need. I want to have a guy flat on his back when I throw him. For me, that just seems to be the most natural way to throw him. Like I don't know how much I would utilize him from half guard, for instance. Um, but from the mount, if you can get to mount, I could really, I really think that everybody's going to start utilizing him when they get to that mount position. Um, and they're pretty lethal. So, um, yeah, or even actually the two positions I think that will be utilized the most is obviously from mount, but also from the guard, um, because the guy's flat on his back. You need him to be flat. You can't have him turn to a side. It's harder to do. You're usually pinning the other shoulder down or trying to. So I think from the guard and from the mount are the two positions we'll see the 12 to 6 elbow utilized the most. And if anybody, yeah, if anybody can do it, John. I know there's been a lot of talk about they should overturn his one loss to Matt Hamill. My only, I guess, not complaint, but my only reservation there is like you fight in the rule set you're given, and if you break a rule, you break a rule. Whether you agree with the rule or not, that's the rule you agreed to play by. And at the time of him landing that on Matt Hamill, the rule was you couldn't do it. So the idea of overturning it doesn't really sit right with me. It's like if they're going to overturn, even something like Nick Diaz, whose whole career was altered as a result of smoking weed, and you hear a lot of people talk about, man, the CSAT or Nevada State Athletic Commission, they should really go back and give that guy some of his time back or compensate him for it. And I understand that 100%, but at the same time, these are the rules we're playing by, whether we agree with them or not. We agreed to play by those rules, and so the past is the past. But it'll be exciting watching it kind of unfold here in the next few months. Similar to what we saw with the calf kick, and when that started getting utilized, I think Henderson was the first guy to really start using them really well, and now it's like most guys don't even train, traditional Muay Thai thigh kicks as much as everything's about the calf kick. So, that's I think we always got to take this sport in context. It's still a young sport. It's still developing. There's still new techniques being explored by fighters in the gym, by coaches in the gym, and then utilized in the cage. And so, even if you look at a sport like wrestling, which has been around forever, you look at a wrestling match today, and then you go back to like some old footage from the 70s or something. It's a completely different sport, And so, yeah, it'll be fun to see the evolution of the sport, especially as some of these rules that we've all kind of complained about for years, hopefully continue to get changed.
Awesome, Cody. Well, one last question for you before I let you go. Back-to-back wins, dominating fashion in both of them. I guess where do you see yourself at the end of next year? What would you like to have by the end of 2025?
I mean, I think, you know, a big part, obviously, a big part of this sport for me at this stage of my career and where I'm at is to make as much money as possible. I think that was why I was so hard on myself after the fight immediately because it's like, damn it, I didn't get the finish. I'm not going to get the bonus most likely. And so that's always this, other than winning, that's the next most important thing for me. Um, but the other kind of side of the coin for me is one to hang my hat when it's all said and done and know where I stood. How good did I get? Was I able to? I climbed to number 12 in the world, or number 8 in the world, or number 1 in the world. But whatever that's going to be, I want to know where I stood. And so, I got a little bit of momentum now. I got 2 in a row. If I can, God willing, build on that and have a third in a row or a fourth in a row, and in 2025, I could definitely see myself, by the this time next year, hopefully getting an opportunity to get a ranking next to my name. I think that'd be pretty damn cool. I've been fighting a long time and trying to climb that ladder. So, that would be a feather in my cap, and that would be that's the goal competitively for me is I want to fight those guys on in the rankings, and so yeah, I mean, it's one fight at a time, and it's one round at a time, it's 1 minute at a time, but I think long term goal is to get a ranking and see how high I can climb and how far we can take this.
Yeah, man, that would be awesome. I talked to Eamon Zahabi. I think he's like 36 or something, but he went on the like 5 fight tear, finally got a ranking. So I mean, 2 more wins for you. I mean, you might be there as well, right?
Yeah, I think people, you start building some momentum and getting some wins, and especially dominant wins. Um, opportunities present themselves. So, uh, like I said, one fight at a time, one round at a time, 1 minute at a time, one day at a time, one training session at a time. But that's definitely the long term goal for me.